right. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these things and where these things go, and I can work to differentiate them, and I'll show you some examples if you need. Okay, so cooperative federalism, we tend to associate that with the rise of the New Deal, and part of the reason is because, you know, under the New Deal, there were just so many new programs, and the reality is the national government couldn't enforce all of those. So they had to start to work in conjunction with the state government, and they would start to pool their resources. Also, the other thing is, if you remember, most of the New Deal legislation dealt with kind of social issues and social problems that they were addressing. Well, that's really state government's job. That's not the job of the national government. So the federal government was intruding onto areas of state policy, but they had the resources, and so the states are obviously willing to take it. So that's what started to foster that kind of that relationship where they're going to start to get intertwined, and the national government is going to become more of like that parent figure in taking care of the states. Categorical grants we associate with the war on poverty. So the thing about, let me kind of work through these two different ones. A categorical grant enjoys a lot of government control. So if we go back to the example with Janie, the categorical grant would be where they say, here is the money, but you must go to UT, you must major in engineering, you must maintain a 3.8. And in theory, they're going to exercise a lot of oversight. That's assuming that that the federal government has resources to actually exercise the oversight. They might say they do, so it just kind of depends with that. But there is like significant government control. There's two kinds of categorical grants. We have project grants and we have formula grants. I'm going to show you guys some examples. Formula grants are the more traditional one, where they're going to distribute the funds based on like whatever the program is and whoever you have that qualifies for it. So, for example, if you have let's say that you have a grant from the national government for a school lunch program, and so you're going to help kids whose families can't afford to buy lunch. Well, then in an area where there's more people in poverty, more kids, they're going to get a larger percentage of that grant. It's just distributed based on a formula. A wealthy area or an area with not a lot of kids is going to get a smaller percentage of the grant because they don't need it. That's all it is. Project grants are really interesting, and I'll actually go show you guys some of them. Project grants you apply for. State governments, local governments, universities can apply for them. Researchers, like all kinds of people. There's actually a website you can go, grants.gov. You can go in there and you can find, and these are all literally United States government grants. So you just go down, let's see, we'll just browse our newest opportunities. Okay, so let's see, grants for consumer protection. Okay, so the national government, let's not do it that way. We'll just browse. Okay, here we go. There is a grant that has been created to provide legal education support for Pakistan. Okay, that is created. It's the Department of State is going to administer it, like they're going to hand it out, and they're going to the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs. So Congress created this program, like it's a funding thing. And so you go down here and you see, well, like who is eligible to apply? It's a legal education support program. If you come over here, it's $1.5 million that they're going to award. Who does it? Sometimes it says like who can apply for it. Where does it say? Okay, here we go. Eligibility. Others, additional information on eligibility. Okay, this isn't a good example. You'll see some that it'll say like this is only for. Okay, here we go. The San Mateo Natural Resource Stewardship. So this is a categorical grant that somebody will go and they will apply for. And who is eligible for that? Any nonprofit organization that doesn't have a 501c3 status, and that just has to do with tax codes, and it's not a big deal. But if you're a nonprofit organization, you could apply for this grant. And what is the grant going to do? Resources. I don't even know what it is. And it's $500,000. And you can get, that would be the max, and the least you could get would be $14,000. So when you hear politicians talking about, we're going to invest money into, like at the State of the Union, President Obama said that Joe Biden is going to lead this war on cancer, and we're going to finally kick this thing. Well, the national government, probably what they're going to do is they're going to create programs to fund researchers to look for cures for cancer. Like, we don't inherently do it ourselves. We pay for it outside. So if you go into academics, you become largely dependent on this, because that's where you get a lot of your money and a lot of your funding. For it, local government, you know, a lot of times Frisco has done some kind of innovative things in their city government. Like, they've been pretty progressive with recycling programs and things. Well, many times the way you get money to do that is you apply for these kind of grants. So that's a categorical grant. So you guys look, there might be some on there for you. Who knows? Okay? All right. So we talked about that. Okay, block grants. So there are categorical, and then there are block. So in the 1930s, we saw this rise in categorical grants, but in the 80s, there was just a massive pushback against federal government control in general. Just pushback about all of these things. And so with the rise of just like the Reagan Revolution, new conservatism, getting back to those ideas, what does the Constitution really say? That's when we saw this idea of devolution. Devolution is not a specifically American term. It just means returning power to your subunits. So in our case, it would be returning power to the states. And so, but the problem, what had happened is because of all that, those programs of the New Deal and the programs of the Great Society, the state governments have really become super dependent on the national government. I mean, like, we administer Medicare and Medicaid, but we don't raise the money for it, the national government does. So they give that to you as a categorical grant, and you distribute it at the state level. Well, if we did away with that, can you imagine? I mean, it's like an infrastructure that we've built. So devolution, really, it didn't make the government smaller, it just shifted the focus. And it gave states more control. But obviously, states are going to really like block grants because it gives them a lot of discretion. So that would be, go back to Jane. Jane, we're so proud of you. You've worked so hard all of these years. We've been saving. This is how much money we have for you to go and get an education. It's earmarked for that. We hope you'll be responsible, but use it as you will. And if her education means world travel and backpacking for a year, so be it. But she's not going to get any more. This is what you get. Okay? Okay, so project and formula are what kind of grant? Categorical, and then there's block. We have both today. Okay, so you can find examples of both, but those are kind of like when they became into vogue and became more popular. Okay? All right, so next thing I want you to talk about then. We need to think about this notion of separation of powers and how does this fit into our timeline. So, I want you to spend some time at your table talking about, as you look through this timeline of the evolution of federalism, what can Congress do to affect federalism? And I've given you some hints. What can the president do to affect federalism? And then how can the courts affect federalism and what role have they played? Just talk for like 5 minutes about this, and then I am going to call in a couple people to share what your responses are.